3 questions. How good is your grip? Can you handle correction well? And lastly, what is the way to an ideal life? Welcome to my channel, That Michelet Guy. If you've never been here before, what exactly do? We read the book of Proverbs, and we read it word by word, term by term, very slowly in its mother language, Hebrew. Hebrew is this very complex language. Most of these terms have layers of meaning, and when you attempt to translate them into English, you generally leave those complexities out. What we try to do is we go back in and reconstruct them. So let's go ahead and jump into today's lesson. This comes from Proverbs 10:17. The English translation from the King James Bible is, "He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, but he that refuseth reproof erreth." So, first glance, if we were to take away what is our first snapshot of this single sentence summary, we'd say that taking correction well is the key to wisdom's formation. And that would be a great teaching. That's what most people would walk away with. But again, that's not exactly what we do here. So let's look at this in Hebrew now. In Hebrew, this is Ruach l'chaim shomer musar v'osef tocheha mate. So word by word from a concordance, that is the way toward life keeps instruction, but the one who forsakes rebuke, he causes to stray. So our first term, Ruach, this is the noun, this is the subject. And as we've covered in all of these Proverbs, that first word is pivotal. It sets the tone for what the entire proverb is about. It establishes what the entire teaching is going to be about. And so the Ruach, this is the choice that leads to the better life. The primitive root comes from a word arak, which means to travel, especially in a large group of people. It means to caravan. And you have to think about this. In the ancient world, there were really a lot of paved surfaces, and over time paths would form from travel, and these roads, they were these perfect ambush spots, so people would travel in big groups. And so when you'd link one large town to another large town and you have lots of people traveling all together, these broad lanes would form. And it was basically, this was the ancient world's equivalent of like an 8-lane highway. And once you would have a way established between one city and another, it means you have this very clear start and end point, and essentially it's impossible to get lost. Lots of people are going back and forth on it. And so idiomatically, this means a well-worn path, that there is a very clear outcome if you just maintain this course. And we've also talked about in Hebrew, there's not really a lot of direct synonyms. So when you see one word used instead of another, then there's a reason for it. So derek, we've talked about this word before, this means the path, but the Ruach, this is the way. Well, what is the difference? Well, the path is more narrow than a way, and it requires more focus and discipline. So in the Proverbs that talk about the derek, this is going to require a lot more discipline because it's easier to stray off of it than an Ruach. It's wide and it's paved. So you have this 100% certainty if you just stay in the flow of traffic. And here, the way, what it's actually pointing towards is this idea that this is the way toward life, that there's no question how to get to this point. And there's no doubt where this road is leading, which is a rich and satisfying life. And millions of travelers have demonstrated that if you just follow it, this will be the outcome. The other way is saying that the way is a person's individual well-trodden road. So his own personal actions, there's a habitualness to it. These are not isolated decisions. This is what we would call somebody's lifestyle or way of life. And it's saying that an Ruach is something that you can stay on or you can abandon. And what we're trying to do here is we're going to establish that discipline and correction will determine outcome and trajectory. And if you exit this path, it means that you're choosing the wilderness, which means life will not be easy. And the outcome, we don't know what's going to happen out there, but it will be dangerous and grueling and probably end bad. So our next term, l'chaim, this is a prepositional phrase. It's a construction on the subject, the Ruach, and it's saying what the way will lead towards. So la is a preposition that means toward, and chaim, this is, we'll get into this, but it basically means an abundant life. And the primitive root comes from a verb haya, which means to live or to be preserved, and it's basically the opposite of dead. And you'll see this term l'chaim. It's a toast. It's a celebration, towards life, to life. And in the Proverbs, this word, it's a deep word. Life is more than what is physical. It implies essentially what is your sensation? Like, is it rewarding or not? And so a full rich life, this will have a wholeness and a stability and a soundness. There's like a deep satisfaction. It's what we would call vitality, that every aspect of life is enjoyable. And this is why this is generally depicted as a tree, that the etz l'chaim, and it means that it's healthy, it's growing, it's strong, it's solid, there's strong branches, it's firmly rooted. And essentially this tree of life, it's going to lack fragility. And that's what it's saying that this lifestyle is. It produces life and preserves it and increases it. So the word life in its single form is Chaim, but when you have it, Chai, and when you have it in the plural form, it's Chaim. And we've discussed it a little bit before that in the Hebrew language, plurality doesn't necessarily mean quantity. It can mean, the fullness and the size. So it feels as if it's plural. It feels overflowing. And this connection to Ruach means this is how you arrive at this sensation. You stay on this way, you will get this sensation, and you will arrive at this place. So what it's actually linking is this lifestyle is dependent on discipline and correction. And if discipline and correction are embraced in this way, you're going to get this type of life: deep and abundant, rewarding and satisfying, healthy, like this big, robust tree. And you will not experience this if you choose a different way. And you're going to introduce vulnerability into your life if you deviate from this path. You may still experience some good things, but it's going to be a mixed bag. You're going to have some bad stuff along with it, and you're not going to have this full satisfaction. So our next term, shomer. This is a infinitive tense of this verb, and it's in the cal form. And so cal, what we've talked about, this is a habit. This is something that's done again and again and again. These are ongoing actions. So it's saying that the person who wants this life, this is what you must habitually do. And the primitive root here, shamar, means to place a hedge with thorns, to guard. And it's a protective defensive barrier. So back in the ancient world, you'd have to protect your garden, your belongings. And if you were wealthy, you could afford to build a stone wall. Stones had to be quarried and they had to be built, and you'd need a team of people to do it. Only rich people could afford walls. So what the poor people would do is they would plant rows of these like little thorny bushes, and over time they'd grow into this thing that people couldn't easily get into, animals couldn't get into, and then they'd have this little narrow gate that they could go in and out of. But essentially it means to protect something. So you build a hedge around it, you keep it, you observe it, you're vigilant about this. And the idea is that what you're protecting it's important, it's valuable, and it'll be lost or stolen if it's left undefended. So it's not able to protect and defend itself, and it requires somebody who's responsible, who's going to be a good steward. And basically it needs a keeper, a guardian, and that's what a shomer is staying on this path is very important. A person guards themselves if they stay on this way, this orak, and it means that you don't allow laziness or carelessness to let you wander off. And he has this goal of this rich and rewarding life, so he guards against his own temptation to exit it. And this verb is going to form a bridge to our next term, musar, but it's saying that he understands the temptation will be to abandon or relax this musar, and he predetermines ahead of time, I'm going to have this defensive posture when it comes to my musar. I'm going to protect it, and if it is lost, then it's going to prevent him from having this hayim that he values and wants. And so he's very vigilant, and this is his garden, this is his fruit, this is what he needs to do, is place this hedge around it and protect his musar at all costs, and he will not experience this rich life if he fails to do so. So our next term, musar, very pivotal term, not just for this proverb, but for most of the Proverbs. It's one of the foundational parts of wisdom. In this particular proverb, it's a direct object. This is what is being kept. And the primitive root for musar is a verb yasar, which means to chastise, to correct, to instruct, or to discipline. And it's central to understanding all the Proverbs. It appears over 30 times in the Proverbs, so it's continually being emphasized. And what it is basically a person with musar. The wise person will have this trait, and the fool will not. And what it is, it's the ability to receive correction. And it's a derived noun, which this is what turns a verb into a noun. So it's like the difference between the verb yasar would be instruct, well, musar, that would be like instruction. And musar is what trains and molds a person, and it requires a submission on their part. It requires eliminating personal pride and to have control of like impulsive actions. And essentially musar reorders a person's conduct, and it changes their orientation, and it is going to involve a certain level of friction and a certain level of pain. And so for that reason, it's a trait that's developed. It's not going to come natural because it's uncomfortable. It is not a person's first instinct. Your first instinct is to reject musar, and that means to choose folly. And our heart is skilled at evasion. It abandons discipline and instruction very easily. It wants to pursue other goals. So this is what this proverb is saying, is that tendency has to be addressed. It has to be guarded against, because we can very quickly revert to an old form, even if we have received musar in our past, that we can still become foolish. And musar is this investment that the mentor is making in the mentee. This is transmitting wisdom, and this is going to prepare them for success in life. But on their side, they have to maintain it, and they do that by staying on the pathway. And that's going to require this continuous course correction. You can't just go on autopilot. You're going to go off course. There's no cruise control. It's not going to self-maintain. It requires stewardship, and the ability to accept this correction. This also prevents these missteps from becoming ruin. And the wise person, they want this tree of life, and they recognize that this musar it plays this very important role to get him there. And so what it's saying is, if you shomer musar, you guard this musar, it means you're self-regulating, that you have internalized shomer, and that you have learned how to develop and listen to this voice inside that tells you no when it recognizes you're about to go off path. It says no, and keeps you on the path. And musar, this is what's going to take knowledge and refine it into wisdom by eliminating the error, but that's going to involve a lot of correction, and only the humble people are going to embrace this process. So now we're going to switch over to the back half of the proverb, and that, like many of these, this is where the pivot happens. So we've established what the good thing to do is. Second half is going to show us what the mistake is. So this first term, ve'ozev, and it means but the one who forsakes. So it's a conjunctive participle. This is the contrast. It's going to show that this is a person who did not choose the first way. And the primitive root, azav, it means to loosen or to permit or to relinquish. And semantically, it means to just relax and loosen one's grip. And so it's abandonment by the way of neglect. And it's a failure to maintain something. It lets it slip away, slip out of the hand because your grip's not tight. And also being in this cow form, this means it's a pattern action. This is not one slip up. This is a trait of this person's character. They've got a very relaxed way of being when it comes to this stuff. So they let it all slide. And this is saying that this is a person who, as habit, dismisses reproof, which is our next term. But this is just their general posture towards correction in general. They leave it behind. They let it go. This is going to basically establish that this is how one departs the path. This is how you step off of the arak, as you let go of musar. And this person, they feel that correction, it's not life-preserving. It's something that's unwanted. It's intrusive. And the release means that he possessed it at one time, but he didn't have the discipline to maintain it. He let it go. He started at musar in the first half, but now he's going to graduate to our next term, which is rebuke. And this person, they don't accept either form of correction. So our next term, tokeha. And this means rebuke or reproof. And this is the direct object. So this is what is actually being forsaken, is the primitive root here. It means to harshly correct, to verbally confront somebody, or to give a reproof. So essentially the best way to think of musar is something gentle. Tokeka, this is musar with a sharp point on the end of it. And this is somebody who has moved from the easy way to the hard way. So tokeka, this is delivered with force. This is not like just emotional venting. The tokeka, this is going to have this like great detail of exactly where the error is, so that there's no confusion. And it's a very specific lesson. And basically it means that this tokeka, this is going to feel personal, because it is, and it's going to test a person's individual receptivity to receive tokeka. And musar can have this feeling of like being something very broad and very general, but tokeka, you're going to know this is about you specifically. And essentially it's saying that in the second clause, this person, they have no excuse for error. They were not talked to in like a vague general sense. They have been called out. And so because of that, there's no way to feign ignorance. If the lesson fails to take hold, it is 100% on them, that this is a flaw in their character at the level of their will. And this person is saying that they have released themselves of the responsibility, that they're choosing their own ego over truth, that they are preserving their self-image over change. And basically this is a way of saying that they would rather die than change, that this error is so entrenched and stiff that no form of correction works, not even tokeka. And then our last term is mate, and this will complete the participle, and this is what's known in the hifel form. The hifel, Hebrew, it's all about establishing who did what, and so this is establishing that there's a direct causation. This is the total impact, and it's going to say that deviation will be normalized that through this repeated action. And the primitive root, ta'a, it means to vacillate or to reel or to go off course. And so this whole language is one of trajectory and motion and travel, and this person is not just going off course from the self, they're course corrupting. And it's basically saying that it's his relationship to correction, his mindset is what caused this. It's saying that his posture is what is allowing him to continue to select this again and again, in that infinitive form. And the acceptance of either form of correction, either the gentle form or the harsh form, could have prevented this. But because he has gone off course, he's blazing this new path for himself and for others to follow. And people might see how he's going and follow him, which means they too are going to reject this full life. They're going to imitate him. So now he's not only ruining his life, he's corrupting other people. And this whole proverb is basically about these two things: the direction one takes and the posture they hold. And so having the correct relationship and the correct posture to discipline and correction, that's the key to this abundant life. And a person is either going to choose one or the other. They're going to have a fullness of life that embraces correction, or they're going to have a rejection of correction and reproof, and then they're going to be disoriented, and that is where life becomes unrewarding. So musar will teach where the boundaries are. Reproof is what is enforcing what those boundaries are, but keeping musar, that stays within the boundaries. And if any of these are not present, the musar, the reproof, or the guarding, then life that's rich will evade this person. So now that we understand what each of these individual terms mean, we're going to take a little bit closer look at the proverb itself, that Solomon was this incredibly gifted writer, that these proverbs will form this two-line verse form, but
within it, he's expressing, 3, 4, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 simultaneous parallel thoughts. And when we take this closer look, we'll actually see what's at play, and we'll see that the proverb itself has this like hidden inner wisdom just in the structure itself. Okay, so let's take a little closer look at the elements that play within this proverb. So the first concept that we see grouped together are the actions that are being taken. And this is a contrasting proverb. So we're going to see the difference between keeping and forsaking. And the proverb is placing musar as an object. So it's something that can be possessed and protected, or it's something that can be neglected and abandoned. So in this first clause, we see that this person values and keeps musar, and that's why they're heading towards life, that he sees that correction of himself is something valuable, it's worth preserving, and he stays within the lines, he imposes his own boundaries, and because he does this, he skips life's harsh realities. And in the first clause, he maintains his grip. The second clause, he's releasing himself from the grip. The second clause, rather than keeping the musar, he abandons it, and so that's why he graduates up to harsh rebuke. The second clause, he doesn't see musar as something that's helping him. He sees something that's intrusive and insulting, so he hates it. And so the second person in the second clause, he's going to venture outside the lines, and because of that, the life he experiences is harsh, and so are the interactions with others. So he's receiving tokeka. He's being, really, really hard criticism. And essentially what we're seeing is between the difference between keeping and forsaking the musar is that life is going to teach the same lesson to the second person. It's just going to do it much less gently. And he's not going to learn either way because he's not positioned to receive it. Our second concept that we see grouped is the education methods themselves. So in the first one, we have this idea of a gentle instruction. And in the second clause, we see like hard rebuke. And what we're seeing is we're seeing different levels of urgency. And so there's an escalation, and the message becomes more narrow. So in the first clause, this person sees this correction as something that's good, that's being done for them. It's a gift. Second clause sees it as something bad that's being done to them. It's a punishment. And in this first clause, there's a willingness to change from the error and to do it rapidly. But the second, there's an unwillingness to change on any timeline. They're just not going to do it. The first clause, there's minimal friction. He responds to this gentle instruction and everybody moves on and he's wiser and they can tackle another lesson. But the second one, there's tremendous friction. There's screaming, there's tension, there's tokeka. There's this relationship between him and this, whoever's correcting him in this way. There's stress, there's strain on it. And then lastly, in the first clause, we see that this person recognizes instruction is very general, that the lessons he's being taught, they're going to apply to anyone, they're universal. But the second clause, he sees any form of instruction as a personal attack, it's cruel and it's pointed at him. Third concept that we see in this proverb is the idea of the direction itself, that the first clause, he desires a good life, but the second clause, the good life isn't important. Self-rule is, that's his priority. And this first clause, he embraces that there's going to be a certain level of pain from having his character pruned. He's going to have to sacrifice some personal pride, and it's going to sting a little bit. But the second person, he's going to end up having the pain he experiences is going to be more harsh. It's going to have these damaged relationships from the tokeka. It's going to have harsh consequences. He's going to find out the hard way of why he should have done it the way that he was being corrected to do. And this first clause, this person knows exactly where his path leads. He's walking this way that's been paved before him, and he knows that there's musar that's necessary to arrive there. The second clause, there's no musar. He's forsaken it. It's not even present, and because of that, his destination's unknown. He has no plan. He's just going to react to things as they happen, and whatever comes out of his way, it's going to be something other than this good life. And that comes to our last of the concepts that are being grouped, and that's the idea of stability. Is this idea of there being a way versus there being straying, which means being lost. And this first clause, he's experiencing life's richness. He has a good relationship with the corrector. He knows his destination is certain, and he embraces the mechanism that allows him to stay on the path, which is correction. That's what keeps you there. And because of this, the first person, he's avoiding folly, but the second person, he's going to receive folly by default because he didn't accept the correction. He only gets partial measures of fulfillment, but he gets full measures of pain. He has this damaged relationship with the person who loves him and trying to correct him, and his destination's uncertain. But we do know one thing: it will not be the first path, and that's because he rejects the mechanism which allows him to stay on the path. So hopefully this closer look at both the words meaning themselves and how Solomon chose to arrange them in this contrasting form will let us see that, this is so much deeper than that first glance. And that's how most people read the Proverbs. They just blast right through it. They see it on the surface. They move on to the next one, and nothing really sets in so deeply. So let's go ahead and recap this one. Proverbs 10:17. He is in the way of life that keepeth instruction, but he that refuseth reproof erreth. Translation, give it 10 out of 10. Word for word, clause for clause. It's right on there. So big three takeaways. Number one, wisdom is about posture, not raw intelligence. It's a cultivated trait. The ability to receive correction will determine if you become a wise person or not. Number two, instruction has no value if you do not keep it, or if you attempt to use it in a situational manner. Partial implementation is incomplete work. You won't get there. And then the last one, a richly rewarding life should be our goal. It's the promise that wisdom offers is total satisfaction, that the heart is at rest. You're not going to have all the anxiety and all the pain. The path's been blazed. Billions of people have walked it. They testify that this is how you reach an emotional and spiritual place of health, by following this form. So what we're going to do now that we understand the proverb in this conceptual form, we're actually going to look at how can we apply it. We're going to look at three areas where it speaks to our life: a surface level understanding, an internal understanding, and then a spiritual understanding. Okay, so if you've been following the channel for a while, the first of the guided talks is what we call the dad talk. And this is just very, very basic surface understanding of the proverb and how do we apply it. It's fatherly advice. It's basically what can you take away from practical wisdom, put it in your toolkit, implement it day one, and you'll just simply be a wiser person if you live off of these principles. So this is obviously a proverb about this whole concept of musar, which is discipline. And this is really, one of the key components to becoming a wise person. There's no such thing as a wise person who's undisciplined and reckless. So the first thing, correction. You have to learn how to be wrong in a graceful manner. And your first instinct is going to be to argue, to justify your position, to explain why you think your way is better, or why it's unnecessary, or maybe you're going to look and seek somebody who's going to tell you you are right, and look for validation. But none of these things are going to help you. They're just ways to not conform to true things. And a wise person, they're going to start at this humble place where, even though it stings, they're going to allow themselves to be corrected. There's going to be a certain level of comfort in owning your wrongness and permitting error to be purged from you. So this deference to a person who is wiser than yourself, this is going to be like rocket fuel in your engine. This is going to send you up to a place where you're going to develop wisdom. And this is this whole idea that knowledge is the first part, but correction, this is what refines it. And that's the difference between the wise person and the average person, is that they reduce and they eliminate the things that are wrong out of their life. And that's going to involve a lot of correction. Second one, we're going to see this term musar come up again and again and again and again throughout all the Proverbs. Solomon really hammers this term so many times, and it's almost always, like in this proverb, it comes with a warning that you have to maintain it. That the reason why this is emphasized over and over and over is because this is the most common thing that people do. They abandon what they've been taught. They try some other way. They become very relaxed. They do not maintain discipline. This will only work when it is guarded and when it is kept. That this whole tendency to relax and relinquish your grip on these things, this is the common culprit that lets someone venture off of this path, this way. Third, last thing, rich living. Avoiding error is stabilizing. This is one of the things that frees up a person's time to see and experience how good life can actually be. But when chaos reigns, you just can't see it. You're going to be in a place of anxiety or depression, or just life's not going to feel good. This discomfort of developing humility is going to have a lot less sting than the pain of error. And this reduction of pain is ultimately what makes life rewarding. And that's what frees you up to recognize how good God is. And when we choose his way, his wisdom, life is wonderful. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take a little step back and maybe from a little bit more elevated position, and not necessarily look at the surface level practical application. We're going to see, where does this proverb actually start talking to our inner person, our lev, our heart, what governs us inside. Okay, so the next part of the video, if you've been following the channel for a little while, that we talked to, is what we call the lev talk. The lev is the Hebrew word for the heart. And we discuss the lev in every single video because it's very, very, very central to understanding that in the culture that these proverbs come from, that this is the center of the inner life. Western thought will treat the idea of the heart as a symbolic thing to just kind of mean this vague place inside of us, and we don't draw a differentiation between the soul, spirit, heart. But from this Hebrew wisdom culture, each of these are three very distinct things. And the lev is going to have this primacy for the individual, because it's got these tremendous inner tasks. The first one is to form a deep relationship with God. This is where the connection point is going to be. This is where you're going to store wisdom in Scripture. This is where you're going to basically, this is how you download information. The second thing that it's going to do is it's going to govern the internal self. So it's got to, protect this little spirit, raise him and bring him up, but it's also got to govern behavior and develop its own inclinations and appetites, and do it in a healthy way. So the lev is just like, it's the center of internal living. And the Proverbs, they speak so much wisdom, but they work incredibly well as a reverse diagnostic. When you read them in the opposite, you can identify the causes of failure. So like we've talked about, the fool, their life is full of mostly failure. The average person, it's going to be a mix. They're going to get some things right, they're going to get some things wrong. But the idea, the wise person, this is about eliminating these errors, and then that's going to free you up to experience this much higher level of life. And the primary cause of error is not learning in the first place, or rejecting the correction, having it stored in your mind wrong to begin with. But the second one is to forget or to abandon the teaching that you had. And because of these two things, it's going to say that an ignorant person with the correct posture, they're going to progress much faster through life than someone who may be technically intelligent but proud. They're going to end up foolish. And the main reason why the ignorant person is going to have the advantage is because they change. And Muzar, this is going to start out externally through this form of teaching and correction, but it ends up internal. And so this is where this is key bridge. When we first launched the channel, we look at the idea that wisdom is this constellation, that it forms from these 11 primary inputs. And the other way to look at it is like a construction project. You have a ground floor, a second floor, and then a capstone. And Musar is kind of like, it's this perfect bridge between the internal and the external. It takes teaching and again, it refines it. It crafts it into something much more durable. And the mechanism of the refinement is correction, and it identifies the error and then removes it. And so this wise person, they're going to understand and recognize how this works, and they're going to lean into it. And you can kind of think of it like a professional marksman, and it's the difference between the person who hits an occasional bullseye. That's going to be the average person. Yeah, there's sometimes that they get it right, they just can't repeat it. They don't know why they got it right, they don't know what they need to improve to get it right every time. But that marksman, he's going to be able to hit a consistent bullseye. He's just dialed in. And essentially the idea is that until correction happens, there's going to be a lack of precision in your life. And this is an easy concept to grasp, but it's a very difficult one to actually put into place, because your lev is going to have to change its own posture. It's going to have to change its own internal tendencies. So that's when we see that in that second clause, and really in the first one too, the verb tensing is very important. It's a present progressive, so it's a continuous action. It's hence the idea that this is keeping. This is where the fall is going to happen. It's going to be when you release the grip, loosening up. That whole term, ozev, that we covered in the second clause of the proverb, comes from that primitive verb, azav, to release. So before your musar can be forsaken, it has to be released. And musar also means self-discipline. It's something that you're able to impose internally. And this is the whole idea of shomer, which is guarding and keeping it. And then lastly, when your lev develops a love and appreciation for musar, it prevents tokeka. It means you don't have to deal with a drastic intervention that's going to involve a strong rebuke. And musar catches error in its infancy while it's still malleable, while it can still be changed and redirected. But if there's entrenched error, that means musar has already been rejected. And the easiest way to prevent tokeka is to just simply love musar in the first place, and to never deviate from the path by maintaining this firm grip on it. So this scripture, this particular proverb, is literally telling us that if we can institute this character trait at the level of our heart, abundant life is what will stem from it. It's a formula for success. It's repeatable. The way, the orak, is indeed, it's wide, it's paved, it's tried, it's true. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take an even deeper look into this proverb and see if there's rich symbolism. Where does it actually talk to our spirit? What does God want us to take away in a spiritual sense from this proverb? Okay, so the last part of the video that we end with is where does the Proverbs speak to our spirit? We're looking for Jesus. Where does the New Testament and the Old Testament, where are they reflected? Where is God's universe present in this? Is there something that Jesus said? Is there something that Jesus taught? Is there something about the way that he lived his life that is modeled by this proverb? And a big part of what this channel does is trying to see the New Testament through the lens of the culture that birthed and preceded it. This is where the heritage comes from. And in Jesus's time, the daily language for basic conversation was Aramaic. And Greek was this lingua franca that was used to communicate with the outside world for trade and treaty. It's what most of the Roman Empire used to communicate. But when it came to scripture and for prayer, for study, Hebrew was a sacred text. It was only read in Hebrew. So the message of the Gospels is universal. So that's why it translates so well into every language. God wants us to know all of those things. But, seeing Jesus as this rabbi named Yeshua who spoke Hebrew and taught Tanakh is going to be central to understanding so many of his recorded words, because, not that we know of did he speak Greek, and I highly doubt he spoke English. So we rely on these translations of what he was probably trying to communicate from the sense of his Jewish heritage as this rabbi. And that's part of what we try to do is we want to slowly demonstrate that Hebrew is this complex language that has layers of meaning in every single word. And that's why we read the word study portion the way that we do. And this will help us with this idea of retroversion, being able to see Jesus in his own culture. And we actually see a ton of Jesus in this proverb if we know what to look for. Some of his most famous and quoted sayings are hidden in this very proverb. And if we read these words in Hebrew, we'll see it. But if we read it in English, we probably won't. So in John 14:6, one of his very, very famous, often quoted, that he is the way. And the New Testament word that's used here, it was written in Greek, so it's a word that means hodos, and that gets translated as the way in English. In conversational Aramaic, that would have been urka, so very Semitic language, very similar to Hebrew, but in Hebrew, it'd be that first word that we use in this proverb, orak. And in this proverb, we also studied this word, chaim, and this idea of the plural formation in Hebrew, that not meaning plurality, but quantity and depth. That's the idea that a chaim is a deep, rewarding life, full, satisfying, robust, overflowing. Well, in John 10:10, the word that's used here in Greek is perisan, and it gets translated in English as abundantly. So we can surmise that Jesus, in his own mother tongue, was likely using this terminology and concept that we studied, chaim, this Jewish concept, the fullness of life. The proverb also addresses this idea of shomer musar, keeping instructions. Well, now that you know that means, it sounds a lot like the end of the Great Commission, doesn't it? The very thing he repeatedly tells us that we will do if we love him, obey him, keep his instructions. That's shomer musar. He tells us to endure to the end in Matthew 24:13. Tells us that we'll be saved. So the idea that we're going to hold tight so that we won't stray, he's warning us, don't relax your grip. He's telling us the two things that happen in the second clause of this proverb, ozev and mata, forsaking and straying. So if we look at this proverb through this lens of seeing these words in Hebrew, can we hear Jesus a little bit? Is there a little bit of an echo? And he's saying, I'm the orak, I'm the way. There's billions of people that have followed him for thousands of years. And so yes, this path, this way, this orak, it's very, very wide, but the gate, it's narrow, it's him. And he tells us that if we follow his orak, he's the way, that it will lead to hayim, abundant life, this richness that this proverb is speaking to, keeping this musar, following this way. And in the testimony, there's just billions of people for thousands of years. They keep coming to this man Jesus and having a similar, if not identical, experience. It's the same story over and over and over of he opened their eyes, he opened them up to God. And when he says, if you want to have this abundant life, follow me in this way, just keep my commands, shomer musar. And this is actually the hardest part. And it's because it requires this tremendous diligence, this discipline, musar, internally. And it has to be grounded in love for him. And then lastly, in this proverb, it tells us don't let go, lo ozev, because he's not going to forsake you. And he tells you that his grip is strong. No one can snatch you out of it. And he also tells us that, if we've wandered, he's going to go after his lost sheep. But, the saving power of the gospel is universal. You do not need to know a single word of Hebrew to receive it or to understand it. And it doesn't do you any good if you don't obey it, or if you have a lack of love in your heart. So, but there is something very special when we can recognize Yeshua, this loving son, this rabbi from Nazareth, who has this wisdom greater than Solomon. And he's tucked away in these proverbs if we know where to look for him and how to look for him, because he's going to train us, his disciples, in righteousness. And God is the same today, yesterday, and forever. That's why there's a harmony between the Old and the New Testament, and in the entirety of all this scripture. It's about Jesus, including these mishle, these proverbs that we study. And when we allow these words to write wisdom on our heart, this is us seeking his kingdom. And he tells us we will be filled. So let's go out and shomer musar, keep his commands. And we go out into the world and teach others to do likewise. So I hope you enjoyed this teaching on this particular proverb and got something out of it. Would like to see a little bit more social engagement on the channel. Leave a comment, share it on social media. Let someone know that this channel exists, because the world's a dark place. It needs the light of God's gospel going out into it, and it's also a foolish place. It needs the mishle. Mishle are not just for believers; they're for anyone. Everyone benefits from wisdom. You can believe that the moon's made of cheese. It's not going to change the fact that being a disciplined person who receives correction is going to make you wiser. So that's just real easy evangelism, is just to let people know that a channel like this exists, that we open the Word of God and we engage with it in a very honest way. And just let people know that Yeshua and Lady Wisdom are both calling. If you have a specific request, just email me, thatmishleiguy@gmail.com, ThatMishleiguy@gmail.com. We'll put it in the queue. We'll get around to it. We kind of compare it to life as this big giant test, and God wants us to ace it. So he gives us all the answers ahead of time. That's the Proverbs. That's the Mishle. And we help someone else pass their test when we share it with them. So please get out there and do it. Life is very painful if you live in folly, and this word is there to keep us out of these patterns, such as rejecting correction. And you'll continue to make mistakes in life, but if you listen to Lady Wisdom's voice today, it does not have to be this way anymore. Shalom, shalom.